5 years ago, Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, and Tyrese Haliburton entered the league. But if we could do it all over again, would they still go in the same order? From breakout stars to surprise busts, we're redrafting the 2020 NBA draft class based on what we know today, and trust me, some of these picks will surprise you. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button if you love NBA deep dives and debates. We also do MLB and NFL content bi-weekly. Now let's fix the draft, pick by pick. And with the first pick, we have the Timberwolves, still taking Anthony Edwards. An easy no-brainer for Minnesota as they go from the top dog in this draft, and they do not change that. Anthony Edwards, there is no one else in this draft you would trade for Edwards, and Minnesota with back-to-back conference finals appearances behind their young star. Don't mess up this pick and do the exact same thing. I don't think you trade Edwards' production for literally anybody. His three-point shooting, his slashing, just what he brings to Minnesota, what he means to that city. First overall pick, absolutely nailed it. No complaints. And with the number 2 pick, the Warriors, instead of drafting James Wiseman, I have them taking Tyrese Haliburton. Knowing how Golden State won the title just 2 years later, some people may say to keep the pick just to not mess with the cosmic alignment of the world, but quite frankly, the Warriors made a terrible pick here. And even though Haliburton plays the same position as Steph Curry, you go for the talent here, taking one of the leading point guards in the NBA, Tyrese Haliburton. At the time of recording, he's up 2-1 in the NBA Finals. How that pans out, considering this video is going to come out in like a month, we'll see if he's an NBA champion and Finals MVP or not. But regardless, still a fantastic player, and talent-wise, the second best player in this draft. I think the Warriors, even just disregarding position fit, you're either going with LaMelo here or Tyrese Haliburton, but Tyrese Haliburton after these playoffs is definitely the better player, and he's more of a facilitator. And Steph Curry, the best off-ball player of all time, could definitely play off Tyrese Haliburton, make it work how they kind of had Chris Paul and Steph Curry tried to do that, but I think this works better with a young player that they could develop, and he could also learn behind Steph Curry, so I think that's a great pick for the Warriors here. And with the third pick, I have the Charlotte Hornets still taking LaMelo Ball. Again, the Hornets don't change their pick here. LaMelo Ball, despite the injury concerns, is one of the few bright spots in Charlotte, and given the chance to do it again, I think they easily take him here and don't mess up one of the few good things they have. The only other option here, considering like who's already off the board, would be Tyrese Maxey, but I believe LaMelo Ball's a better player, and I think he's also just better to be a star of a team, like the main focus of a team. Charlotte doesn't have much going for them. One of the few things they do have going for them is LaMelo Ball, and I just don't think they get rid of that here and just keep the things the same they did. And with the fourth pick, I have the Bulls, instead of drafting Patrick Williams, take Tyrese Maxey. Here's one of the ones that is definitely worth the change. Tyrese Maxey getting taken instead of Patrick Williams, who's in a pretty solid player, but Maxey is one of the budding stars of the league and has shown he steps his game up in the playoffs against the Knicks 2 years ago. He went absolutely off in that series, and you always want a playoff riser. And honestly, I love the fit for the Bulls with Maxey. I think that makes them a very fun young team and a really intriguing team for the next few years. I think if they have a guy who could score like Maxey can, the Bulls, I think they really, kind of build towards their identity. Maybe they do a little bit better in the Levine years with Levine and Lonzo Ball. I apologize. I think that really could help them build their core a bit better, and I think, having Tyrese Maxey on the team makes them, I don't think it makes them a championship contender, but a very, very fun team to watch. And now with the 5th pick, the Cavaliers, instead of drafting Isaac Okoro, draft Desmond Bane. Isaac Okoro has shown flashes, but overall he's been a disappointment for Cleveland. So if they've got the chance to do it over again, I have them going with Desmond Bane, a great three-point shooter going into the draft who has developed into a very good 3-level scorer for Memphis. If the Cavs were to add him to their core, it becomes scary for the rest of the league. Desmond Bane, very, very good player, very good scorer. He could score at all 3 levels, and I think that's something Cleveland could definitely take. Okoro, not been great for them. He was really drafted for his defensive, prowess and, his potential with his athleticism, but he really hasn't panned out for them. Maybe get him in a new fit and he could, really show that potential, but as of now, I have them taking Desmond Bane, very good shooter who I think the Cavs would love. And with the 6th pick, I have the Atlanta Hawks. Instead of taking Onyeka Okongwu, I have them taking Jaden McDaniels. The Hawks got Onyeka Okongwu, but they could have got Jaden McDaniels. McDaniels is one of the key pieces to the Minnesota team that could have been a huge help to the Hawks team that went to the conference finals the next year. An excellent defender who could guard 1 through 5 and would have been huge for the Atlanta team, especially, in 2021 when they went against the Bucks. I think in that matchup against Giannis, he could have very much helped them. I don't know if they win that series. That Bucks team was really incredible, and even if they do they beat Phoenix? But I think it gives them a way better chance getting a defender like that. I think he's a great fit for that Hawks team. He doesn't need the ball in his hands all the time, and I think that's someone that the Hawks, if they took, very much could have changed their future. And with the 7th pick, I have the Pistons. Instead of drafting Long Island Nets legend Killian Hayes, the Pistons here go with NBA Sixth Man of the Year, Peyton Pritchard. Hayes, of course, is a pick any Pistons fans would take back if given the option. But to get Peyton Pritchard in the spot, who's a crucial member of the championship Celtics team, which would be a great piece for the Pistons. I think, they got Isaiah Stewart eventually in this draft, so I wouldn't call this draft a complete dud for the Pistons, but getting Peyton Pritchard here would be absolutely astronomical for that team, to get a guy who could just kind of do everything off the bench, and he would have really helped them maybe, stay away from the disastrous 2024 they ended up having. I think that's really something that the Pistons would have loved to avoid. Obviously, just, the blemish in their franchise's history, and Killian Hayes, who has been quite frankly a bust for them and is on the Nets now, bouncing between the G League and some minutes in the NBA on one of the worst teams in the league. I think Peyton Pritchard is an absolute no-brainer here. NBA Sixth Man of the Year. No complaints here from the Pistons. And with the 8th pick, I have kind of a weird one. The Knicks, instead of drafting Obi Toppin, draft Immanuel Quickley, who obviously they ended up eventually getting, but now they just get him 15 spots earlier, and he ends up on the same team. I have the Knicks taking Immanuel Quickley. There's really no debate here on what could have happened if the Knicks had Quickley, because, well, they did. But the only difference in this scenario is that he goes a bit earlier. I don't think the Knicks would trade Quickley's production. They eventually traded him for OG Anunoby, who's one of the best players on their team, one of the best two-way players in the league, 3-and-D. OG really gives you whatever you need on any given night, and I think the Knicks 100% still take Quickley here. And I think, Obi Toppin, which was the original pick, is still a very solid player in his own right, but he never really had a shot in New York because they got Julius Randle that same offseason, and I think, he didn't ever have a chance to start or really develop, especially with Thibs. They had a big back and forth. They did not like each other. He's really coming to his own in Indiana, but I don't think he's an 8th overall pick worthy player, and I think Immanuel Quickley here, who the Knicks still ended up getting, I think is a great pick for them. And with the 9th pick, I have the Wizards still drafting Deni Avdija, who has turned into a really solid two-way player in recent years, helping Portland at both ends of the floor. Here I have the Wizards still taking him in the spot and keeping him, having him develop instead of in Portland. He really came into his own in Portland, not in Washington, but I think the talent's still there. I think Washington still takes him, and maybe in this, different alternate reality, they keep him and he really develops into who he ended up being in Portland. In Washington, a very solid player who still is definitely worth the number 9 overall pick. And with the 10th pick, instead of the Suns drafting Jalen Smith, I have them drafting Onyeka Okongwu. The Suns, who made the finals the next year in 2021, could definitely have benefited from the size and defense that Onyeka Okongwu could have provided them. He's a bit of a late bloomer, only coming into his own as of recent, but the Suns definitely take him here for the upside. I think they definitely need his size. I think they need his defense. And even though he developed a bit later, I think you still take him here just because, you look at the Suns' future. Obviously, we're doing this in hindsight 5 years later, and it's someone that the Suns definitely need now, and they've needed in the past 5 years, just the defense and size. I think that's something that they've sorely lacked, and even with DeAndre Ayton, who's not a great defender, you could have had him play good defensive minutes off the bench for them for that 2021 team, and maybe change the outcome of the finals. And with 11 here, I have another keep, Devin Vassell to the Spurs. Devin Vassell, despite the injury concerns, is a very good basketball player and someone I still have the Spurs taking in this spot. San Antonio is really building something special, and Vassell is a huge part of their young core. I think with a chance to do it again, they don't change a thing. Obviously, he's been hurt a lot, but I think he's a very good player. I think alongside Wemby, I think alongside Castle, Chris Paul, I think they have a lot of good pieces in play. They have the 2nd overall pick again this year, who will probably be picked by the time this video is out. But I think that's something that the Spurs just don't change. I don't think they change what they had. I think Devin Vassell is a very good player, despite the injury concerns, and I think here they keep things the exact same. And the Kings, with the 12th pick, they draft, instead of Tyrese Haliburton, Aaron Nesmith. Instead of going for one of the Pacers' current players, with Haliburton off the board, which kind of sucks for the Kings because it's weird to punish a team in a redraft and give them a worse player, but Tyrese Haliburton easily goes super early in this draft and would not follow 12. They did a great job of drafting originally, but Aaron Nesmith still a very good player in his own right. He's a streaky shooter, but he's very good when he gets hot and could really win you games on his own. He's won playoff games for the Pacers on his own with his immaculate shooting in Game 1 against the Knicks, one of the most miraculous comebacks in the history of basketball, which really changed that series. Could have gone to Game 7 in New York, but now the Pacers are up in the finals as of the day of recording. He's a very good shooter and off-ball player in his own right. Obviously, sucks to not get Haliburton in this spot, but the Kings still get a very solid player in Nesmith, and you don't really complain about getting Nesmith at pick 12. And at pick 13, the Pelicans, instead of drafting Kira Lewis Jr., get Isaiah Stewart. The Pelicans are sort of an identityless team currently, and in 2020, coming the year after drafting Zion first overall, why not get a great culture setter and great player in his own right, Isaiah Stewart? I genuinely think drafting him could have been huge for their franchise with their lack of identity. He comes in, gives them one immediately, and gives them a definite impact. I almost do worry about his fit next to Zion, but if it works out, I think defensively that's an amazing, that's amazing front court. I think that's very hard to score on. I think he's a very talented player, and he's very much a culture setter, which the Pelicans lack. The Pelicans don't really have an identity, honestly. They're kind of a lackadaisical team, and I think having Isaiah Stewart be in there in the mix, I think really changes things, and I think it would have been huge for not only the team, but Zion's development as a whole, mentally and as a player. So yeah, I think that would be a great pick for the Pelicans here. At number 14, the Celtics, instead of drafting Aaron Nesmith, I think they get Isaiah Joe here. The Celtics here got a good bench scorer and three-point shooter. This is great for them as their identity is largely centered around good three-point shooting and having great floor spacing, and ISO Joe really helps them continue that identity and gives them another option off the bench. The Celtics, Nesmith very good, Isaiah Joe, they're very similar players. I have them going back-to-back picks here, but I don't think they complain with Isaiah Joe here. They get good shooting, really help continue to build the identity they have, an identity that won them the championship last year with their three-point shooting, floor spacing, and a deep bench. I really don't think they complain about what they got here, and I think that would be great for the Celtics' future. And at number 15, I have the Magic still drafting Cole Anthony. I have the Magic keeping Cole Anthony here as they need the volume scorer that can take over on a hot shooting night. That team largely centered around having a good defense. I almost had him going a pick earlier to Boston, but I feel as though Boston already has too many mouths to feed, and the volume at which Anthony shoots the ball and needs the ball in his hands, I don't think he'd be a good fit for them. I think he's a much better fit on the Magic, who need scoring and can really, let Cole Anthony have the ball and shoot a lot. So I think it's a very good pick for the Magic. I think they would not change things if, given the opportunity, and I think Cole Anthony is a very good bench scorer for them. With number 16, I have the Trailblazers. Instead of drafting Isaiah Stewart, who eventually got traded to the Pistons and after being dealt to the Rockets, which is a mouthful, they get Najee Marshall here, the Pistons. The Pistons, who traded for this pick to get Isaiah Stewart, unfortunately don't get him here as he goes earlier, but get a very solid player in the originally undrafted Najee Marshall. He has come into his own as a very solid NBA player in this season, even started some games. I think they really like what they get out of Najee Marshall. Obviously not going to be Isaiah Stewart, but I still think it's a very good pick for them, and I don't think they very much complain about getting him at 16. At the 17th pick, the Timberwolves, who traded the pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder, so the Thunder select Obi Toppin. Originally drafted at 8, Obi Toppin, who never really got a proper chance to develop with the Knicks due to Julius Randle and Coach Thibodeau, he goes 17 here to the Thunder after a trade with the Timberwolves. Toppin has developed into a very good role player, being a floor-spacing 4 who's a great player in transition with the Pacers, with constant flashy dunks and highlights, having won a dunk contest. A very fun player to watch and someone who could definitely fit into that OKC core with the shooting ability from the perimeter, letting Shea kind of control the paint and kick out. So I think Obi Toppin's a very good corner 3 shooter, and I think just having that spacing for the Thunder, I think just adds another layer to their offense, who very much benefits off Shea getting the middle of the floor to himself, being able to draw fouls and kick out when needed, and that the Thunder offense really runs well, and I think having another transition piece like Obi Toppin would be very huge for their offense. And at 18, the Mavericks, instead of drafting Josh Green, they get Patrick Williams. Patrick Williams, who's been a bit of a disappointment for a top 5 pick, but I don't think you would be upset at his production if you got him at 18 here. A solid perimeter shooter with overall decent score that will give you 9 a night off the bench. Could be a solid pickup for the Mavs, who maybe he could have really benefited from, development being behind Brunson and Luka, 2 of the top guards in the league, 2 of the top players in the league, bar none. So I think that really could have been better for his development, and also the less pressure of not being drafted in the top 5. But I think that's something that the Mavs really wouldn't complain with their production here, and at 18, I don't think he would be viewed the same way he's viewed as the 5th overall pick. And with the 19th pick, the Nets, who originally had the pick, was traded to the Clippers and then to the Pistons. So the Pistons here still taking Saddiq Bey, who on a good night is a 3-level scorer but is inconsistent 3-point shot. The hope here is he still has time to develop that 3 ball. He can seriously become a very good 2nd or 3rd scoring option on a good team and can benefit the guys around him with better floor spacing if the 3 ball develops. He's still very much a question, if he gets that 3 ball down, which he has shown flashes of shooting, but it's been very inconsistent. He is a 3-level scorer, and that's something you'd never, ever pass up. And I think here, if they could really develop him with the Pistons, I think that would be absolutely amazing for them. They have a good young core here, and Saddiq Bey, who obviously didn't stay on the team in real life, maybe could have stayed on the team and, really developed that 3-point shot and became just a great scorer for them. And with number 20, I have the Heat. Instead of drafting Precious Achiuwa, I have them taking Isaac Okoro. Honestly, the Heat here got a very similar player going from Precious Achiuwa to Isaac Okoro, but I have them taking Okoro due to his upside. Originally being a high pick, Okoro has been a bit of a disappointment for Cleveland, but maybe a change of scenery and less pressure can be good for him as he's still young and has plenty of time to develop for them. They get a very good, potentially good defender, a guy who has very high upside. I think him and Precious actually ended up being very similar players in terms of their production now, but just because of the upside, I definitely have them taking Okoro here, who still can very much develop, and the Heat, who have done very good job developing players in the past, really could have benefited maybe Okoro's career and just the less pressure of being the 20th overall pick instead. I think that maybe could have been something that really revitalizes his career in Miami. And with the 21st pick, the 76ers, instead of drafting Tyrese Maxey, take Trey Jones. Another team who gets punished in the redraft. The Sixers initially got a steal here in Tyrese Maxey, but with him going early, now they got Trey Jones, who's a very solid backup point guard in the association, with a very solid assist-to-turnover ratio, and he does a great job being a floor general off the bench and helps runs the second unit. The Sixers, with a lot of scorers on the roster, happily take him here in a redraft. I let him create for them off the bench. He's not a very risky passer, but he's a very solid one. A very good backup point guard. You facilitate. If you have scorers off the bench, you can facilitate for them, let them get their open shots, and I think that's something the Sixers obviously get disappointed with no Maxey here, who's a great player, but I think you're still very happy here with the pick. And at 22, the Nuggets, instead of drafting Zeke Nnaji, get Josh Green. Josh Green, who has a bit of a slow development so far in the league, but with his athleticism and build, the Nuggets definitely take him here. I also believe getting him out of Charlotte would have definitely done him favors, as maybe with good coaching and the right players around him, he takes better advantage of that athleticism. The upside's still high here, and obviously any player who, hasn't panned out, you wonder, like a different situation, different fit, different city, not being in Charlotte would have been great for him, and maybe could have really drafted to become the player who he, could have been with all that upside. The 23rd pick with the Timberwolves, originally drafted by the Knicks, but traded to the Timberwolves. Instead of Leonard Bolmaro, they get James Wiseman. The Timberwolves here, I've taken the original number 2 pick, James Wiseman, who has a lot of upside still, and is a very talented, hasn't been able to put it together yet. But going to Golden State really wasn't the best fit for him, and he got drafted immediately into a win-now situation. But with Minnesota, they could spend more focus on developing alongside Edwards and maybe get more out of him. It's funny that in this redraft, the Timberwolves end up getting the original first and second picks, but Wiseman here, not been what he was touted to be for Golden State. Golden State really, regrets this draft, and they really could have, kept their core. They got a championship, so you don't really complain too much if you're Golden State, but if they got a guy like LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Maxey, Tyrese Haliburton like they did in this redraft, I think that's something that the Warriors really, really could have built something special and had even more championships and continued their dominance. But right now, he goes to the Timberwolves, and I think with more time to develop and not being immediately put into a win-now situation could have been huge for Wiseman, and he really could have developed into a different player in Minnesota. And with the 24th pick, the Bucks, who got traded to the Nuggets, R.J. Hampton. Instead of R.J. Hampton, K.J. Martin. Initially a late second-round pick, the Nuggets here I have taken K.J. Martin, who's a very solid bench piece, who could give you 8 a game with solid rebounding numbers. Just a solid piece for the Nuggets off the bench. He could give you consistent, solid nights off the bench night in and night out. You're not going to get anything too crazy with him, but you always take solid bench minutes. Bench minutes are huge in the NBA, especially with now how the second apron works. The disparity of teams. You're just going to need a solid bench because it's hard to keep stars together in this league. And I think getting a guy like K.J. Martin off the bench for the Nuggets who could rebound and score decently efficiently would be huge for them. For the 25th pick, I have the Knicks, who, being traded from the Thunder to the Timberwolves to the Knicks, who originally got Immanuel Quickley here, they still end up getting, instead of getting IQ at 25, the Knicks took him at 8 here, so I have him picking Nick Richards, a center who's an athletic 7-footer and a lob threat for the Knicks. Having a backup Mitchell Robinson, who oftentimes has gone down due to injury, makes this a great pickup for the Knicks, who definitely can benefit from the lob threat, giving them another scoring option off the bench, something they really lacked in the 2021 run where they ended up losing to the Atlanta Hawks. And also just in general in the last 5 years, I think having Nick Richards for the Knicks would be huge. I think lob threats is something the Knicks have sorely lacked and honestly could have really helped their team. They get the pick and rolls with Cat and Brunson, and then if they also have a lob threat there, I think that's something that they really could have kept caught defenses off guard when they're sleeping. And I think that's something that the Knicks really could have done great here with this pick. And with the 26th pick, the Celtics, instead of drafting Peyton Pritchard, unfortunately, they get Sam Merrill. The last pick in the draft here shoots up the draft board to go 26 to the Celtics. Now that Peyton Pritchard is off the board, Merrill further pushes the Celtics' identity, giving them good shooting and floor spacing off the bench. A good story for Mr. Irrelevant, who's carved out a solid NBA career as a bench player. Obviously, Peyton Pritchard was a steal here, getting the future 6th man of the year for the Celtics, but Sam Merrill, a very solid player in his own right, and a very good story. Mr. Irrelevant who's really carved out a solid career in the association. And I think the Celtics are still very happy with the production they get here. At the 27th pick, the Jazz, instead of drafting Udoka Azubuike, they get Paul Reed. B-Ball Paul, I have the Jazz taking here in a solid role man off the bench who brings a lot of energy in his minutes off the bench. A very good rebounder for his size and a great identity piece for the Jazz, who lack that. So getting him here could be a good signing for them. The Jazz obviously blew it up in the next few years, trading Rudy Gobert, trading Donovan Mitchell, and now they kind of lack identity. So I think getting a good young energy piece in B-Ball Paul will be very good for them. Nothing too crazy, but with the 27th pick, you definitely take Paul Reed here. The Lakers, who traded the pick to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who originally got Jaden McDaniels, another absolute steal. I'd have him this time taking Precious Achiuwa. The Timberwolves, who originally got Jaden McDaniels here, they get a solid bench big in Precious Achiuwa instead. Precious Achiuwa is a super athletic energy guy, can give you solid minutes off the bench, is a good defender, and has come into his own as a solid third center for the Knicks. Will be a solid pickup for the Wolves here. Obviously, late in a redraft, you're not going to get the best players, 20th best player in the draft, but Precious Achiuwa, for being the 20th best player in the draft, is still a very solid player in his own right. He's a good third center option, and I think, the Timberwolves would never complain with getting that production off the bench here, and I think that's something they really could have benefited from. At 29, I have the Raptors drafting, instead of the most random 50-point scorer of all time, Evil Dante, Malachi Flynn, I have them taking the originally undrafted Lamar Stevens, who has bounced around and showed flashes, but on a Toronto team who are retooling, it's a nice little pickup for them. I think it's someone who maybe could develop even better in Toronto because he's going to get minutes, he's going to get time to develop with a team that's retooling after their championship in 2019. Malachi Flynn's a very fun story, but not the greatest player. It really shows how good the bench guys are, though. Like, the last player on your bench can just drop 50 in an NBA game is crazy, but besides that, which he ended up doing for the Pistons anyways, you're not getting much out of Malachi Flynn, so I think Lamar Stevens here is a better pick for them. At number 30, the Celtics, instead of drafting Desmond Bane, who was traded to the Grizzlies, so the Grizzlies here, I have taking Xavier Tillman. The Grizzlies, instead of getting a steal in Desmond Bane here, got Xavier Tillman, a strong, solid energy guy who can give you rebounds off the bench and give you decent defensive minutes. It's a disappointment to not get Bane here, but with the players off the board, you got to get the solid rebounder here, an energy guy in Xavier Tillman. He's been bouncing around. He's I don't know how much time he has left in the association, but he's still in 5 years later. So I think at number 30, in a redraft where everything goes perfect, I think you don't complain with getting Xavier Tillman here. He's a very solid player in his own right. No, Desmond Bane stinks, but I think you still get a very solid player here. Thank you all for watching. Let me know in the comments, what year would you want me to do next? If you wanted me to do another draft year, 2019, 2018, what draft would you like to see me revisit and repick everybody in? Thank you all for watching. I hope if you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. We're making more NBA, MLB, and NFL constantly, bi-weekly. And we're trying to grow the channel, improve us, or tell us what we can improve too. So thank you for watching and have a good one.